I'm Mateo Bravo, one of the CSMs here at Anecdotes. And for the next 15 minutes, we're having a conversation I've been wanting to have for a while. Vertical versus horizontal AI and GRC. Full disclosure up front, I'm a heavy Claude user. I use it every day. So this isn't a takedown. It's about what happens when AI already knows your world versus when you have to teach it. Horizontal AI is the most efficient hire that you might add to your team, but it initially lacks the context, processes, and tools that might make it the most intelligent and accurate. Vertical AI, however, shows up already trained on day one, out of the box. Your team also won't be the ones sinking time and resources into maintaining it. To discuss the considerations for implementing both types of AI tooling, I've got two people who run serious compliance programs and use both kinds of AI daily. Chad Fryer, head of GRCP at Docker, and Pierre-Paul Furland, GRC senior manager and AI builder at Coveo. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you both for joining us today. Chad, let's kick things off with you. So, Chad, you work with both GRC analysts and GRC engineers. When it comes to your team, do you have any preference for vertical or horizontal AI?
To be honest, it's kind of a clear split. And it took me a while to admit that, if I'm being honest. I've built out a pretty extensive horizontal ecosystem at Docker. Claude connected to Notion, Claude connected to Slack, Google Drive, our risk register, skill files that encode how our program actually thinks. My GRC engineers and we get enormous value out of that because it's our opinions that are coded into the tools themselves. My analysts, however, they don't need any of that. Honestly, working in a vertical system is completely fine for them. They just need to be able to have a conversational AI chat that is enabling them to do what they need. The system, it already knows what the controls are, it knows what the evidence looks like, the frameworks, exactly how they map to each other. Those opinions are already coded into the tool, and that's realistically all they need. So I frame it internally is it's capability versus opinion. The vertical tools ship with the opinions baked in. That's exactly what my team needs out of them. The horizontal tool ships with none of it. It's all based on us. We have to create all of it ourselves. And for our engineers, that is just insanely valuable.
All right. Chad, can you walk us through a moment where that speed mattered?
So it's most likely going to be, it's not really during audit season. It's when like sales leadership walks in with a new framework that our company's never touched. Usually there's either an entire market segment behind it, or the question's never, are we compliant? It's how far off we and what would it take? They need a level of effort with that answer, and they need it fast because there's a customer conversation going on. We're at a go, no-go decision waiting on it. Genuinely, in the past, that was extremely painful. Someone pulls a framework, they build a spreadsheet, they map out every requirement to our existing controls and evidence. Manually, it's like 2-week tasks. Sometimes by the time you finish, some of that information's already becoming stale. With Claude, it's like a day and a half entry because there's context that needs to be built in and a foundation to build on for Claude to be able to pull the correct answer. With ChatGRC, it's the same day. It's usually a couple hour delay in the conversation. Framework goes in, it maps against what we already have, and I can Slack sales leadership a couple hours later and say, here's what we covered today, here's the gap, here's roughly what closing it looks like. Part that I care about most as a program lead, it's going to be how speed changes how security and GRC are perceived. When the answer to can we pursue this market comes back in hours instead of weeks, GRC and security, we're no longer being the department of no. We're no longer slowing down deals. Instead, we become a team that actually enables sales. And once we get sales on our side, everything else kind of falls in place for us. So that perception shift is worth the tool cost itself.
Thank you so much, Chad. Over to you, Pierre Paul. So you're a builder. You've got a heavily customized, interconnected system of AI tools in Coveo. How does vertical AI fit into a program as complex as yours?
I would say it's able to fill in the gaps nicely. So we use a commercial GRC platform, Anecdotes, not to name it. But here's a spoiler. Anecdotes is not perfect. No tool is perfect, right? And so the vertical GRC is able to get those little things that we wouldn't be able to get out of the tool. So it's a perfect complement. On top of that, the vertical AI that we benefit from has the built-in connectivity that we need since Anecdotes connects to everything. We're able to interrogate the evidence much more efficiently. Could we do it in theory with a bunch of MCP servers, with a bunch of connections, with scripts? Yes, but it's tough to manage. Whereas on the vertical side, it's all coming right out of the box. And as Chad mentioned previously, it's opinionated. And for an analyst, it doesn't have to worry about that part of the game. It doesn't have to worry as much as prompt engineering or intent engineering or whatever. It just works for the intent that you have right out of the box, connects to the systems, connects to the right evidence, needs less context, and therefore is a bit faster.
All right. And how have you used both types of AI tooling for, something like audit prep and execution?
Oh, well, that's actually an exciting one, because and that's an argument for having a great vertical AI platform, right? Because so not to turn this into an anecdotes infomercial, but we have our auditors audit system connected directly to anecdotes. Therefore, everything our analysts see in a given framework, whether we're doing SOC 2, whether we're doing ISO 42001, it's the same evidence that gets sent by APIs. And so if tomorrow, like Chad has a use case, the sales team wants a new framework, then we can import that frameworks through our vertical GRC platform. Ask the chat, oh, can you do the mapping for me, please? Can you map the evidence? Oh, we don't need to regenerate the evidence. We don't need to take another screenshot because the evidence is already there. And it gets sent directly. It could be sent in real time to the auditor. Oh, and by the way, it also gets sent to the trust center. So there's economies of scale, there's economies of accuracy, and we can have a clear view and not worry about updating versions and like working if we were using different spreadsheet. Oh, you wanna AI UC1? Oh, it's the spreadsheet that I sent you by email. No, no, that's not how it works. And even if you use something like a Claude and you have a project, well, the project have files, they Word files on your computer and your Google Drive, it gets confusing real fast. Whereas if you have a vertical platform, then you have more consolidated. That's not to say the horizontal part is useless. It's a great DIY way. It's a great way to work if you have nothing.
All right. Well, thank you, Pierre Paul. All right, gents, we're moving on to some rapid fire questions before our next segment here. So let's close out the QA with some quick ones. So where does horizontal AI still win for you?
What you didn't ask, though, is where horizontal AI is the biggest loss for us, and that is cost. Not every enterprise has an Oprah that's sitting there and she's throwing unlimited credits to everybody. Employees, you get tokens, you get tokens. For the GRC team, there are some GRC teams that have a limit, and utilizing something like ChatGRC is going to remove a potential heavy spend for that GRC team and allow them to shift that AI spend elsewhere. So it comes with a cost, man. It's great, but it comes with a cost.
There's such a thing as UI fatigue. So we have to work where people work. So the GRC part is great for your team, your GRC team, your GRC operations, your risk operations, but people will not necessarily log into that platform. So this is why you need an MCP server, because that way, with your horizontal AI, you can bring the content from your GRC platform elsewhere.
All right. I think that's all pretty valid. And what have you gentlemen tried with AI that you've had to roll back?
We created something called Wristwatch. We rolled it out for a while. It was doing fantastic. However, we had to roll it back because when you really get into it, you realize there was a lot more work that needed to be done, and a human needed to be the one that's actually providing all that enrichment. We also rolled it back because it decided to interject itself into every single Slack conversation, whether or not it was invited. So everybody on Slack was screaming, "You have to turn this off."
I got pretty much the same problem with an agent that would go into Slack and spam people. That's the reason why we pulled off one of the bots that I had built.
All right. Well, thank you so much, gents. That's all the time we have for Q&A. We're going to be moving over to a little demonstration here now. Now, before we get into any testing results or comparison of AI tools, here's a scenario of what we're working with. We took two AI tools and gave them the same GRC questions. On one side, Claude, and to be clear, we didn't hobble it, so we used the most capable setup as provided out of the box. The Fable model, maximum effort, sub-agents running in parallel. We pointed it at what a newly hired GRC analyst may realistically have. So a Google Drive with folders of evidence, screenshots, policies, and risk and compliance information tracked on spreadsheets. Dozens of artifacts organized in a simple yet effective folder structure. On the other side, ChatGRC, working off the same underlying information, but as structured and interconnected data inside a clean test instance of anecdotes, no additional customization, every feature structured as shipped. Every answer you're about to see was checked by hand. A team of GRC professionals verified the inputs, outputs, test cases, and testing conditions. So this isn't AI grading AI. Now, first use case, terminated employee access reviews. This is one that most GRC practitioners have lived through. User access monitoring and employee offboarding. The question is, of our recently terminated employees, how many still have active accounts across our identity providers, Jump Cloud, OneLogin, or Entra ID? That's the exact question an auditor might ask, and the kind of thing that could keep a CISO up at night. Same prompt, both tools. Now, both tools produce an in-depth analysis, but at a high level, let's take a look at the disparity between outputs. The correct answer is 5. 5 terminated people are still active across all 3 systems, verified by hand against the actual data. ChatGRC got it right, 5, named correctly. Now, Claude said 8. It erroneously flagged 3 additional inactive users. The horizontal AI assumed that these 3 users were still active because they had MFA configurations captured in a screenshot. That's the real cost. These 3 false positives introduce doubt and the need for further verification. If your new analyst trusts the 8, they potentially waste anywhere from an hour to a full day validating this response or pursuing corrective action that was unneeded in the first place. If they had trusted a lower number, they'd have missed a real risk and potentially a systemic failure. Either way, someone has to go verify by hand. ChatGRC knows better. Now, moving on to the second use case, ISO 27001 password policy report. So in this second use case, relevant to any org that puts an emphasis on continuous control monitoring, maybe you're gearing up to pursue a FedRAMP 20X certification. We asked both tools to produce a control operating effectiveness report for secure authentication as defined in ISO 27001. From the same password policy evidence, same prompt goes into both. Let's see what we get. Both outputs look great, professional, formatted, confident. On the screen, they're almost indistinguishable. But when a GRC professional assessed the outputs on factual fidelity, traceability, testing, logic, and accuracy, they identified several concerning deviations in the Claude output. ChatGRC consolidated control metadata, evidence metadata, and even more granular control effectiveness metrics extracted from comparing the intended design of the control to whether or not the evidence collected supports that design and implementation of the control. Again, no additional customization, all produced with functionalities as shipped. Now, Claude wrote the more polished-looking report, but called the password policy approved and in effect when it's actually still in draft pending sign-off. It recommended mapping the evidence to controls it was already mapped to. It even described an API it never actually looked at. None of that is stupidity. It's a highly capable tool, but filling in gaps confidently without the necessary additional context to paint a full picture. Completeness and accuracy are very important for auditors and a critical part of the assessment. Claude hallucinated and used the file creation date as the evidence collection date. It also inferred and essentially fabricated the API call used to produce this data. Another example is Claude setting false expectations for Jump Cloud password configuration as opposed to what is actually defined in internal policy. Even though testing criteria exists in the data provided, Claude overlooked that an expiration routine of 90 days is more restrictive and better to have than a password that doesn't expire. Now, a report that is wrong but looks right is worse than no report, because an inexperienced individual or somebody without the right context may not take the time to validate the results. That traceability, the rule, the result, timestamp, is exactly what ChatGRC gives you out of the box, and exactly what you're left to rebuild by hand otherwise. So, 2 use cases, Same story. The model isn't the differentiator. We gave Claude the best. The differentiator is the underlying data and context driving the analysis. Point a generic tool at a pile of screenshots, and it behaves like a brilliant intern on day one. Fast, confident, and occasionally confidently wrong. A purpose-built GRC tool understands the structure. So the answer you get is the answer you can actually put in front of an auditor. Every AI answer carries some sort of verification debt. The question is whether you pay it or the tool does. Thank you so much for joining me for this discussion and this demo, everyone. Now back to you, Meryl.